Hey folks, David Stewart here. I'd like to talk a little bit today about a book I wrote. Here's the cover for it. It's called Voices of the Void. It's another 2 to 2.5 hour experience like my previous little book, Crown of Sight. You can get it on Tuesday on Amazon, or you can get it for free by jumping on my mailing list, dvspress.com/list, at least for the next few days until it gets released, and then you'll get a different free book for joining my mailing list. This is a book that I had a very interesting time writing, and so I'd like to talk a little bit about how I wrote it and some of the experiences I had while writing it, as well as what's actually contained in the work itself. I tend to describe this book as Lovecraft meets Aliens. It is a science fiction horror book, or sci-fi horror. So Aliens, the movie, directed by James Cameron, and H.P. Lovecraft's horror work. Each of those influences should be pretty obvious when you actually start reading the book. First of all, you have a series of action scenes that happen. Really, it's one long scene. I don't have any scene breaks in the book as a matter of technical construction, but you have lots of gun-based action, and the action and the tension and the violence from that increases as you go deeper into the story, and indeed you go deeper into a mine. So there's the other side, which is the descent into madness from H.P. Lovecraft. Both of those influences also go a little bit deeper. So one of the things that you might be familiar if you've seen Aliens or other sci-fi horror movies is you have a space colony that's deserted. That's the first thing that you're presented with, which is something that is familiar from the Aliens movie as well. On the other side with H.P. Lovecraft, you also have lurking within everything the threat of madness. Indeed, the main character is not quite sane, something that becomes apparent within the first few thousand words of the work and becomes an increasing threat as he goes deeper into this mine. He's becoming more and more mad as he goes towards the center. And like Aliens, there's a big threat at the end. There's a threat at the center of the nest, if you will. This isn't a bug hunt kind of book like Starship Troopers. It's not a bug hunt like Aliens. Rather, instead of bugs, what you get are what would be the equivalent of Lovecraft cultists, though they are definitely more twisted and less human than I think what Lovecraft has written, other than a couple of his stories. So they're monstrous people that the main character Andrew encounters as he goes deeper and deeper into his investigation of this colony that has lost contact, and the people are apparently missing when he walks into it. Now, there's other things that I think are original. I didn't consciously set out to emulate these two things, but that's what the vision really was, and that's an easy way to articulate it, is that it's Aliens meets Lovecraft. So if you're a fan of either of those, or a fan of both of those, as I know many of you are, I hope that you'll take a look at the story, either by grabbing it for free off of my mailing list or by buying it on Amazon. You could pre-order it right now, the ebook, and the paperback will also be available hopefully on Tuesday when everything goes live. And if you did get it from the mailing list, hopefully you'll think about leaving a review. And of course, you can still buy it and get a physical copy of it if you want, if that's something that interests you. I'd like to also show you another piece of fan art that Ibrahim Swai did, and I'll maybe link his Twitter down below. He could always use more Twitter followers. Great artist. He did a live stream on how he designed this. I guess he read the book and did this great art of the main characters, Andrew and Mariella, and so maybe that'll give you a little bit more images. And again, one of the things I like about this fan art is it very much reminds me of the science fiction, the visual science fiction things of the past, like Aliens. The guns, to me, look very futuristic. They look very militaristic, kind of like what you saw in James Cameron's Aliens. Now, how I constructed this book might be rather interesting from a technical standpoint. There's no scene breaks, as I mentioned. It begins really in media res, in the middle of things, but not quite. It begins with the main character walking into the colony, and so everything outside of the colony is only tangential to what's in there, and you have to kind of discover it indirectly through indirect mentions of Andrew's mission, what he's doing in this mining colony. And I liked the idea of no scene breaks because I felt like scene breaks give the reader a chance to pause. And because this is a 2 and a 2.5 hour experience, it's not really necessary for the reader to feel like he has to pause unless it's like an unbearable moment. So that helps me to keep the tension going. I have to always keep the reader interested every moment. And sometimes when you have a scene break, when you have a rest, a cadence in the story, it gives a chance for you to be a little bit boring. And I really didn't want to do that. I wanted this to be interesting and action-packed all the way through. Indeed, it starts creepy, and as it goes from creepy, it becomes more filled with action, and that's another way I wanted to construct it. Likewise, I had to execute a couple of things in a way that was difficult for me, which is the main character has a bit of a superpower due to his insanity, which is he can see the future, a little bit into the future, and he can also see things that happened in the past. Problem is he's not in full control of this. It gives a definite advantage if you could see what's lurking around a corner, but it's not always reliable, nor is it without cost, because part of his psyche is locked away and is basically evil. And so he's in a constant war trying to figure out who he is, what his actual identity is, and how he's going to focus on what his duty and what his mission is without losing control of himself. And so, of course, as he descends into madness, the threat of madness becomes stronger and stronger until you get to the core, the deepest part of the mind, where there is a threat of one of these old ones, let's say, what he calls a Wurtla. And I'll talk about one more influence before I move on, which is actually a video game series that if you're of my age group, you might have played it. It's called Marathon. It was a 3D shooter made by Bungie in the 90s, originally for Macintosh and then later for PC. And I think the only game that came out for the PC or for the Windows PC was Marathon 2, which is a good game. But Marathon Infinity was the one that I really remembered when I was creating this, which is there's an eldritch horror trapped within a sun, and as one of the aliens makes the sun go nova, this is going to release a horrible thing onto the universe. So that was an influence there. In this case, I had the old god kind of trapped in the earth, and this is a thing that Blizzard actually did with their use of H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. When they put it into their world, is they had the old gods kind of trapped beneath the earth, kind of trapped in the earth by the Titans. And so that's part of the background of what's going on here, and you'll find that when you get into the book. So that's another influence, was actually an old video game. And oddly, you don't see any of these things. It's only explained through text, through these text terminals that you access in the game. But it had such a strong image, I remembered it now, 25 years later, however long it's been since I played Marathon Infinity, back in the 1990s when I actually had a Power Mac to play that game on. So anyway, that's how it's constructed. I think you'll find that it, like a movie, it doesn't really need any particular breaks. That was one of the things I wanted to do when I made this, was make it a limited time experience and make it feel like it's going to take the same time as a movie and provide hopefully an experience that is not necessarily similar, but produces some of the same feelings as a cinema experience. A limited time frame is what I really wanted. Now, another thing about how I made this particular story is I wrote almost the entire thing after midnight. And I'll give you a little bit of background. My daughter was born at the end of March. And, of course, when you have a brand new baby in the house, things are very helter-skelter. Everything's up in the air. I needed to commit a lot of my time to not just taking care of my wife postpartum and facilitating her being able to care for our daughter, as mothers have to when the baby's born, nursing and all of those sorts of things, but also caring for my 3-year-old son, who still needs lots of attention, and certainly doesn't want to lose all of the attention that he got from his father for 3 years of his life. So I had a lot of balancing to do. There was a lot of busyness that was on me, and so after a couple of weeks, after things kind of settled in, I ended up in a point where my sleeping schedule was very weird. And the reason was my daughter, now she's doing better, but when she was a newborn, she was suffering from a thing that is usually called silent reflux. Basically, her lower esophageal sphincter is kind of mechanically weak. And so rather than spitting up, she is constantly swallowing it. And so it it creates a painful sensation, just like when you have, if you suffer from acid reflux or you have heartburn, that's the stomach acid kind of coming up into the esophagus. So one of the ways that she would be able to sleep was me holding her upright on my chest like this. So I would hold her upright on my chest and sit in this recliner. I could actually do it in this chair too, but I'd sit in a recliner in the living room. And I'd hold her so my wife could sleep, because it's really hard to sleep when you're sitting up. So my wife was really craving good sleep. So at nighttime, I would take her, we'd feed her, I'd get her to go to sleep on my chest, and then I'd have nothing to do. So one of the things I did, and something I'm very grateful for, is because even when I'm holding a kid, it's difficult for me to read a book. But if I could kind of do it with one hand, I could read like a Kindle. But I found that the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons, I could hold one in each hand, and I could actually play games while holding my child. So one of the things I did is I watched some TV, and I almost never watched TV. So I watched Death Note. I watched the Death Note anime, which was really good, and had a lot of great images in it that I liked, and a lot of great psychological themes. But I also got to play Final Fantasy, which was a good experience too. I played Final Fantasy VII, and the split Joy-Cons allowed me to actually do things while I held this child, because I can't really sleep upright. But as she got better and better and was able to just go to sleep with my wife, here I am. I'm normally used to going to sleep at about 2 a.m. Because I'm caring for this baby. So I'm staying up late, and what I end up doing is, let me get back into the workflow of things. I'll get back into the workflow of things. Sat down. For whatever reason, the way the schedule was lining up is that I wasn't really getting to sit down at the computer until 11:30 midnight. I also started a different exercise routine. So I'm dealing with family up till 10, going to the gym, I'm coming back, I'm maybe doing some YouTube stuff or some other business, and then I'm sitting down to write at midnight. Well, that's really late. And late at night, when no one's awake and when no one's around, there's things that you start to notice when you're writing very quietly that you don't normally notice in the normal swing of things. When people have a normal sleep pattern, they're waking up, and there's cars going down the street, and there's people talking outside their apartment or outside their house, and the kids are getting up. There's a normal rhythm to life. And so when I was out of that normal rhythm to life, some things started to be kind of creepy for me. And one of them was the sound of machines. We're surrounded by machines. You might be able to hear like my ceiling fan is going, there's a fan on the computer. And so all of the sounds of my house, I started to become more sensitive to, because there was no other noise. The dog's asleep. There's no dog barking. You come in, you hear the refrigerator turn on, or you hear the water cooler turn on. You hear water in the pipes kind of bump and click as you wash your hands or something. There's all these little noises that, in the absence of people and voices, become rather disconcerting. And that's one of the things that influenced me with this book, was this constant feeling that there should be people and there's things happening without people. Think about how much of our life is automated. So one of the first images that I put in this book was a very clean and immaculate space with no people in it, because the robots are, robotic vacuums. Some of you probably have a robotic vacuum. They come out, they sweep up all the dirt. So Andrew walks into this school space and there's no children. And that to me is very, very creepy. And if you've ever gone to a school, and I was a school teacher for a lot of years, you go to a school late at night and there's nobody there and you're doing work or something. And because I was a band director, often I'd stay till late till all the kids came, their parents came and got them. It's really a little bit off-putting to be in places that are normally filled with people and they're empty, like an empty shopping mall. If you've ever been to an empty shopping mall, that's a weird experience, a slightly creepy experience. An empty business building, like if you go to a big tall skyscraper and there's just no one there and it's super quiet and you hear the elevators and the air conditioner, it's just slightly off. When things are slightly off, missing people, that's a big influence. So that's something that carries all the way through the book. Now, the inception of this actually came from a dream. I had a couple of really intense dreams a couple nights in a row due to this weird sleep schedule. I was going to sleep late at night, and I ended up with weird dreams because my sleep was also being disturbed by the baby waking up. So that's one of the things about dreams, is if you are having disturbed sleep, one of the things you'll find is that the disturbed sleep will make you remember the dreams, because you're kind of waking up in the middle of a dream phase, and so that stuff gets logged into memory. And so I had this dream of walking through a space colony, specifically one that was at one point filled with children, and no one's there, everyone's gone. And so a lot of the images, that's how this story begins. And part of the dream that I had, and of course I haven't watched the movie Aliens in years, but there was like lower levels that were darker and scarier, kind of like, like any Descent to Madness. I'm remembering a Stephen King story called Graveyard Shift, where you go into multiple basements at this mill at night, and things get more and more freakish as you go. So that was part of the dream, was like there was kind of scary monsters underneath. And that's what inspired me to write the story. So I woke up and I was like, I had some other dreams that were vivid, but this one really stood out because it was rather frightening and it was very off-putting. And I remember one of the things was these children's toys sitting around with no children playing with them. And they were actually Ninja Turtles. They were these big Ninja Turtle toys, and all the colors were wrong. So I didn't put that in there, but that was something that was a little bit disturbing as part of the dream. That's kind of how it began. And so I worked on it almost exclusively late at night by myself in the darkness alone. And so, of course, it ends up being horror. And when you're writing horror by yourself late at night, it tends to affect you a little bit. So I found that I had a lot of trouble going to sleep after I'd write. I'd write 1,000 words, which I'm like, 1,000 words, it's not that hard to do. I'd sit down and bang out 1,000 words, and that's what I felt like I had time to do. But if I tried to go to sleep after that, I couldn't do it very easily. The images were too, they were too in my mind. My mind would be cranking along too much on the story, and also just repeating these images and coming up with creepier and creepier things that I wanted to put in the book. So what I started to do is I started to read before bedtime again. So that made me go to sleep even later, but it definitely got me to disengage a little bit with the being disturbed, I guess, by some of the elements of my own story, or having to think about them too much, and got me to read some great books at the same time that were not horror. So anyway, that's how I constructed the book. Hopefully you guys will like it. We'll take a look at it. Here's what the paperback cover will end up looking like. It's basically the ebook cover, kind of extended. I made this ebook cover to show a couple of things and set the mood for what's in the book. If you want to know about the construction of this is a planet I created in Photoshop. The only asset, actually it's not true. There's several assets in here. One is this guy screaming. And these tentacles that are on him are actually jellyfish tentacles that I kind of photoshopped onto him. And all of these swirls in this strange dark sun planet thing that I made are jellyfish tentacles. So all of the organic swirls were made truly by organic beings. They were jellyfish shot on a black background that was easily able to pull out and create this image. And also the colors, this orange and purple reminds me of sunset always. And there's something about twilight and sunset that can be slightly strange, slightly weird, especially if you go to like a playground that's deserted at sunset. Things just are a little bit off from normal, and that's some of the colors. And the colors kind of cue into the genre, the horror genre, supernatural horror, cosmic horror, whatever you want to dig into there. Now, I will say, as science fiction horror, this book is actually in a weird place. Science fiction horror, sci-fi horror, is actually not a Kindle category. And that's surprising considering there's like hundreds of Kindle categories. So kind of like my book Muramasa. I'll pick a lid off here. Here's Muramasa. It occupies a space that is not classified by the main company that does this stuff, which is Amazon. This is a samurai fiction novel, and it's kind of samurai horror in a way. There's horror elements in it. It doesn't really fit. It doesn't fit into any of the stuff that people are usually expecting to get with this kind of thing. Really, it would fit closer to manga, manga like Shigeru or something like that, or even anything. Like, it'd fit closer to a bunch of mangas than it would, English novels. Likewise, Voices of the Void fits. There. Now you can actually see it. I'm looking at the wrong camera. Voices of the Void actually fits much closer to movies like Aliens, sci-fi horror movies, than it does books. There are sci-fi horror books, but they end up in horror or they end up in science fiction. There's not like a special category for this setting and this combination of elements. So it's probably going to be classified as like space opera and some other things as well. Anyway, that's the book. Hopefully you will check it out. It comes out on the 23rd. So if you're watching this after the 23rd, it's out now on Amazon. Links are down below in the description. And if you've been on my list or you want to get on my list, you can get the book for free, dvspress.com/list. And if you read it and enjoyed it, a review is very helpful for me as well. So stopping by and just leaving a little review about what you liked or what elements were good for you, that definitely helps other readers to decide if they want to read it. Anyway, that's it, Voices of the Void. And I really had an interesting time reading. I'm not going to say it was a great time because writing horror tends to affect me a little bit, but I'm very satisfied with the product and how it came out, despite all the weird things that went into it. So maybe you'll like it too, and maybe you will enjoy it. So thanks so much, and I will see you guys next time.